The main weakness of Mercedes won't be fixed in 2023. It goes without saying that Mercedes had the most challenging season ever since they came back into the sport, and the sudden drop in performance wasn't something that anybody expected. However, it is what it is, and Mercedes has full hands on her homework for the winter break when it comes to developing a fast car that can produce more downforce without being run too stiff. And for the sake of the narrative, if Mercedes succeeds in this, they are likely to have another issue that won't be fixable that easily. In this video, you're going to find out what this issue is.
When you are out front, when there's no escape of the spotlight.
Mercedes' 2022 season was pretty much dark, with a couple of bright spots. For example, the pole position in Hungary and a couple of P2 and P3 finishes at the same race were something that the team can gladly boast about. With just 2 races remaining on the calendar, Mercedes is trailing Ferrari by 40 points in the Constructors' Championship, something that we are struggling to understand given the fact that Ferrari had the faster car throughout the season. But Mercedes found an increasingly good pace throughout the last 2 races, especially in Mexico, when Verstappen wasn't able to do the normal advantage he usually does ahead of Hamilton. On top of that, Verstappen was on the much faster soft compound tyres, while Hamilton was able to keep up a great pace on the medium compound tyre. However, botched tyre tactics and the hope that Red Bull would go for another pit stop are what cost Mercedes their first win of the season, something that they have 2 races left to achieve. Nevertheless, there is one thing that Mercedes needs to pay more attention to if they want to be ahead of their game, and that is strategy. This is something that they have struggled with a lot throughout the seasons that they had proper challenges to overcome, such as the 2021 finale with Verstappen and the 2022 season foes. Let's see some of the races where Mercedes has struggled a lot with the tyre strategy, apart from Mexico. We're going to analyze the outcome of the Zandvoort GP and how Hamilton and his team botched away a potential win, or at least a P2 finish. When Bottas parked his car on the main straight, the safety car got out and most of the drivers changed their tyres. At this point, Verstappen was leading the race, but he entered the pits and Hamilton didn't. For what it's worth now, the Briton wasn't called to the pits, but neither was George Russell. What the younger Briton did is that he called his own tactics, and he called for his tyres to be changed to soft compound tyres. Leclerc behind him also changed tyres, so Russell didn't lose a position. On top of that, he was able to pass Hamilton and finish P2, while the 7-time world champion finished P4 while being P1 at one point of the race. Had the strategy gone well, Hamilton would have kept the P2 spot in the race, and he would have had a chance of striking for P1. Not only wasn't he able to keep P1, but he was passed easily by Verstappen and Russell, and later on by Leclerc. On the other hand, we are clearly seeing that Verstappen and Red Bull aren't struggling a single bit with the strategy. On the contrary, they are absolutely dominating in this aspect of the race. We've seen Verstappen win races after starting P14, P10 and P7, and although a vast amount of this has to do with the superior machinery he drives, that wasn't really the case in Hungary. Hungary is a place where you cannot overtake easily, and we've seen everyone struggling to overtake at the high downforce track. But that wasn't really an issue for Verstappen, who managed to pass both Mercedes drivers in the pit stop thanks to their strategy after starting P10 in the race and eventually winning it. The Mexico GP was just another indicator that Mercedes is relying too much on simulation, and a great indicator that the team lacks foresight and agility in reacting to certain events, such as tyre strategies. You can't hope that your rivals will change tyres just because you think that theirs won't last until the end if you want to win races. Mercedes were able to see that Perez was closing in on Hamilton and Verstappen was much quicker ahead, and their pace hasn't dropped off throughout the course of the medium tyres. Therefore, the right solution would have been for them to change from hard compound tyres to softs, which would have enabled them to challenge Red Bull at the end. This was a strategy that Ricciardo implemented and was able to finish P7, neutralizing a 10-second penalty in the process. Throughout the Mexico GP, we've seen that both Mercedes drivers are calling in for the soft tyre strategy, as they wanted to end the race on the much faster compound tyres. Could you blame them? Definitely no. They were seeing that other drivers were much quicker on these tyres, and they would have a proper chance of challenging the Red Bulls ahead of them. When you see that the tyres aren't working properly, rest assured that changes need to be made. However, changes in strategy are something that Mercedes seems to be allergic to, and they don't know any other strategy than Plan A. As we spoke about earlier in this video, Russell was calling his own shots in Zandvoort, and that is what enabled him him to secure the highest season finish for him, P2. Hamilton was very angry about how the race ended for him, but at the end of the day he should know better than to just wait for his team to decide for him. What's even more bizarre for Mercedes is that they forgot that Hamilton won the 2019 Mexican GP with a one-top tire strategy and not the classic two-stopper. It seems like the team was so overwhelmed by the fact that they'll finally have a proper chance for the first race win in 2022 when Verstappen goes into the pit stop that they forgot to understand that Verstappen may not even visit the pit stop for the second time in the race. However, we must be supportive of the Brackley-based team and say that sometimes they went into aggressive mode and it worked for them. Such was the case in the Spanish GP in 2021 when Hamilton was able to pass Verstappen after changing tires and the Dutchman felt like a sitting duck ahead of him. Therefore, it goes without saying that Mercedes needs to learn how to convert losing positions into winning ones, and that is a process that they'll desperately need to master for the 2023 championship onwards if they want to have a proper chance at the championship battle. On top of that, they need to understand that the tires aren't really fitting the explanation narrative compared to the previous seasons, and that is something they would have to adapt more precisely to. They don't have to look very far behind them in order to see how things easily can go wrong if you botch up strategies race after race, as they have in the 2021 Ferrari situation. As for the Mexico GP, Mercedes explained what made them do the pit stop strategy that they did, which according to Wolff is what cost Mercedes their first win of the season. James Vowles, the director of strategy at Mercedes, said, "We decided that track position was more important at that stage, and furthermore we had some data from Latifi that had already stopped, and hard wasn't terrible. So we opted to stop, put Lewis on the hard tyre and go towards the end of the race under the hope that potentially Verstappen was going to drop off that medium curve, much as we did see degradation at the end of our stint. With George, there was a lot more opportunity to really keep going long and fit the soft tyre, and that was the plan. It was what we had discussed before the race, and it is what we discussed live during the race with George as well." Nevertheless, Hamilton and George both said that the hard compound tyre wasn't feeling great on their car, and although they managed to finish P2 and P4, it's not what they had in mind initially when they saw that Red Bull would go with the one-stopper. Now that there are only 2 races remaining in the championship, Mercedes' focus for the 2023 season needs to be on understanding the tyre strategies much better and understanding that they aren't anymore in the turbo hybrid era, one that they had zero competition in and were able to dominate without any difficulties. What do you think about Mercedes and their issues for the next season? Let us know in the comments below.